Hello, everybody. It's Brian M. Hauser, and we are back with you on the final few, hopefully, moments prior to the Seahawks announcing their initial 53-man roster. I am Brian M. Hauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HawkBlogger. And we were talking earlier as different cuts were coming out. A few more have trickled out since then. We will talk about those. And even though it is now officially 1:39 p.m. Pacific time and roster cuts were due in by 1 o'clock Pacific time, the Seahawks, at least by my calculations, what I'm seeing, have not yet released their roster. This happens every single year. So that's just the way things go. That's just the way things go as Seahawks fans. You got to get used to it. And if you don't, then you just got to hang out and have some fun together and chat. So I will talk to you about what we know right now. And we'll then, as the things happen, we'll get very live instant reactions. This is what's fun about live shows is I don't know until you know. Sometimes you will know before I know, and we'll just do this all together. So let me catch you up if you haven't already been paying attention. This is what we know as of now. Cuts that have been made that we know about. The Seahawks have cut running back George Halani. They have cut wide receivers Aesop Winston Jr. and D. Eskridge. They have cut outside linebacker edge players Jamie Sheriff and Nelson Caesar. They have cut cornerback DJ James, safety Ty Okada, linebackers Easton Gibbs, John Radigan, and Patrick O'Connell. Defensive tackles, Mario Kendricks and Devere Levelston. Tight ends, Tyler Mayberry, Devin Garrison, Michael Ezeki, and quarterback PJ Walker. The other thing that we know, or at least we've been reported, is Jarek Reed is going to be put on PUP. This is not a surprise. I would expect we're going to hear Abe Lucas is going to be on PUP. I would expect that we're going to hear Cameron Young is going to be on PUP, but I will not put it until we know it. And I'm still expecting Uchenna Nwosu to be on IR, but we don't know that. We're going to wait. And the other thing that has come out since I was last on is that Brady Henderson of ESPN.com, if you haven't noticed, I am quote tweeting and retweeting Brady's stuff because Brady's the guy that breaks like legitimate sourced news, and I trust when he tweets something, it's real. He has said that Nehemiah Pritchett, the other Auburn cornerback, has made the roster. He's going to make the 53. I will tell you that I predicted that, and I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I'm saying to complete the point, I expected the team to keep him. I will tell you that from what I have seen, I don't get it yet. I have seen Nehemiah Pritchett be, I wouldn't say abused, but it's not far from it in practice and in games. So they see something I do not. It might be tools that they think he has that they can develop. It might be that he's playing things in a way that's better than I understand. I'm not a football guy. I'm not in the room. So I'm just telling you, my evaluation of Nehemiah Pritchett has been that he has not been particularly promising as a cornerback. And I'm also not surprised that he's going to be on the roster. So that's update there. There's another bit of news that if you are just joining us and you haven't been paying attention, the Los Angeles Rams have traded their best linebacker. Inside linebacker Ernest Jones has been traded to the Tennessee Titans. They traded Ernest Jones and a 6th-round pick, and they got a 5th-round pick in return. That is a pretty low return, at least by my estimation, for one of the best linebackers in this division. To give you some idea, let me give you, this is, again, not the 53-man, but I will give you a little bit more about Ernest Jones from a PFF perspective. PFF's already got him as a Titan. Look at them. Um, Ernest Jones, only 24 years old. He'll turn 25 this season, so only 24. He's younger than Patrick O'Connell. He's younger than John Radigan. He had an 82.1 grade last year. He had a 90.0 run defense grade, 78.2 pass rush grade. He had 33 pressures, so an excellent blitzer as a inside linebacker. And if you look at him across the entire NFL last year, if we just look at linebacker grades last year, and we look at players that have played, a reasonable amount of snaps, let's say that they've played at least, 20% of the snaps. Ernest Jones was a top 8 linebacker in the NFL last year. And by a run defense grade, he was a top 5 linebacker last year. Now, reading between the lines on this, I will say, he jumped in 2023. His grade in 2022 was a 63.6. His grade in 2021 was a 59.3. And it's possible that the Rams feel like this is one of the players who greatly benefited from Aaron Donald being on the team. And if they were expecting that he was going to take a step back, then one, they wouldn't want to pay him the money that he was asking for. That seems to be clear. 2, they may have wanted to trade him prior to the season when every other team realized, oh, he was a product of Aaron Donald. He's not as good as his numbers might have suggested last year, and that they got what they could. So I don't know. There might be other things that the Rams know, but it's a very odd move to have a young player that you drafted who is blossoming into one of the best players at his position and to not want to sign him to a deal and to jettison him. It could also be Sean McVay knows inside linebacker is a tough position. It is not a position you want to pay big money for because, players are going to be, they're going to be very, there's going to be a high variance with inside linebackers from one season to another. It's a very hard time in the NFL to play inside linebacker. Offenses like Sean McVay's, like Kyle Shanahan's that are very popular right now are putting linebackers in very tough binds. And so there are very few elite inside linebackers that can hold up in coverage and play the run. And so maybe they're just like, hey, we don't want to pay top dollar for that position, even if he is a young player that we drafted. So I think the Rams just got worse. Bottom line, I don't think the Rams can credibly say that they are as good of a team now as they were a few hours ago when they had Ernest Jones as their starting inside linebacker. So I never mind that. Teams slowly coming back to the Seahawks. The other thing that I will bring up for you, a couple other bits of news. Christian Barmore, the defensive lineman for the Patriots, standout defensive interior lineman for the Patriots, is going to be out for the Seahawks game. He will not be there to play that game. He has blood clots. I think it was very serious from what I've heard. Could have been life-threatening how serious it was. So he's not going to be there. Also have found out that I've already mentioned that Bradley Chubb's going to be on PUP, so he won't be there in week 3 for the Dolphins. Odell Beckham Jr. also will not be available for that game when he comes out, when the Dolphins come out. So no Odell Beckham. Interestingly, and this is just coming out right now from Ian Rappaport, Talanoa Hufanga, the all-pro safety for the San Francisco 49ers, has been activated off PUP. Pretty rare to see a player who has not been practicing activated right before the season. That doesn't mean he's going to start week 1, but it does indicate that they believe he's going to be ready to help them within the first 4 weeks of the season, and they don't want to be without him for those first 4 weeks. They also placed running back Elijah Mitchell on IR without a return designation. That means he is out for the year. So that's a decently large bit of news. Dre Greenlaw, as expected, will start out the season as a PUP member. So he will be out at least the first 4 weeks. So that's some updated news there. Let's see. Other pieces of news. I've been very active, but I can go back through. I'm looking at some Rams move right now. If there's anyone here that jumps out and gets my attention. Oh, one name. The 49ers waived Samuel Womack. He is a slot corner. He is under 20. I think he's 25 or so. Has played nickel for them. Their cornerback room has gotten pretty deep. And so it is possible the Seahawks kick the tires on Samuel Womack. They know who he is. And it's possible he could be someone that they look at if Artie Burns is someone that they put on IR, which we will find out soon enough. Interesting, Rock Ya-Sin, the cornerback, has been released. There's a player they signed over the offseason. Wide receiver Trent Taylor has been released by the 49ers. Other players that have been waived that are of note for me. Cameron Latu. I love that because Grant Cohen's going to have a lot of fun with that one. David Lombardi, I'll just leave it at that. Was hyping up Latu as like, he's really come on, and Grant Cohen was totally trolling him about it. Latu gets cut. So again, pay attention to Grant, not to David Lombardi. Yeah, so I think those are the bits of news there for the 49ers. Let's see. Getting back to the lists of things going on. So far, the only player that the Seahawks have reported to have released that I did not expect them to release was Patrick O'Connell. So far, everything else has been spot on. We'll see how close I am. I made my projections even before the final preseason game. Sometimes that's a good thing because you avoid, maybe having a little bit of overly influenced by what happens in the game. For example, D. Eskridge. I thought D. Williams was a guy that they had already decided was going to be the returner, and they were going to move on from Eskridge. That turned out to be true. Still looking here to see if there are any new updates for the Seahawks. It should be dropping soon. Hopefully they release this before I've got to head over to the VMAC. That would be nice because it would make my life a little bit easier. And also we could actually have the conversation, which would be fun. And so far not seeing anything. So let me, a little bit here from the Bears, worth at least talking. They ended up keeping 6 defensive ends. They kept DeMarcus Walker, Darrell Taylor from the Seahawks, Austin Booker, Dominique Robinson, and Daniel Hardy, as well as Montez Sweat. So that is good. This question from Old School. Thank you. He's asking about my son. Yes. So I had to take him to the dentist. One of the things that's a unique experience with having an autistic child who does not have full verbal skills is when they're hurt, when they're in pain, you have limited information about what's going on. So when he started complaining about a toothache for the first time and just kind of holding his cheek, for a few days, you kind of hope it just goes away. But when it doesn't, you take him and hopefully nothing's wrong. From what we can tell, everything's fine. So nice of you to ask, Old School, and appreciate the interest there. So yeah, as it stands, not a lot of surprises for the Seahawks. The George Holani cut, I do think, has an interesting ripple effect for the offensive line for the Seahawks. I think there are a lot of people, most people were predicting the Seahawks would keep 4 running backs. I predicted they would keep 3. There we go. And that would mean if they kept 4, I think they almost certainly would have to go to 9 offensive linemen, which would have meant they would have likely cut Raekwon O'Neal. The fact that they've cut George Halani, I think almost certainly means they will keep 10 offensive linemen, and Raekwon O'Neal makes it. So this is one of those weird things where you're like, well, George Halani's not competing with Raekwon O'Neal. At the back end of the roster, you got all these cross-positional battles that go on, not directly with the player, but just based on who they want for special teams and who they want to keep, taking care of, investing in over multiple years that they want on the roster. I think the names that I'll just show you my 53-man roster projection, and we'll kind of go through this again. The names that I want to be keeping an eye on, a lot of them are on the offensive line. So Mike Jarrell and Satao Lamea, like Mike Jarrell especially. I'll color these for you in real time. Hopefully I can get a axe. There we go. Let me put these in a bright color. Let's pick a yellow. No, I don't know if I like that. Let's pick something just atrocious. Let's pick an orange. Okay, let's pick an orange. These are the guys that I have particular interest in what's going to happen. So Mike Jarrell, I am a little bit curious about Drake Thomas. The dream's alive that Drake Thomas may be the apple of the team's eye, the way he's become an apple of my eye. I haven't seen enough of him play, but I'm just enamored with his build. He looks like a elite athlete, and I'm really curious about him. I think that's really it. I mean, I expect Marquise Blair to be waived. I expect these guys to be gone as well. We do know Nelson Caesar and Jamie Sheriff, as we talked about, have been waived. Miles Adams could make it. He's one of those guys that could make it, but will be off the team by tomorrow if the team decides to sign a nose tackle that they like off of waivers. If they get if they're granted a waiver on a player that they like. So Miles could make it initially. Keon Bars, a long shot, could make it. I like Keon Bars, number 73. Levelston and Kendricks are already gone. But really, it's the offensive line. Jarrell's probably the number one name that I'm like, ooh, what are they going to do there? All these other guys, I mean, they could keep Cody White, but I don't think they will. We already know they've let Tyler Mabry go. So I think Jarrell and Drake Thomas are the two guys that I'm a little bit curious about. But for the most part, I think I've got it right. We'll find out. There's a question here of how many people on the practice squad. There's 16 guys that you can keep on the practice squad. So a large number. It's interesting. You kind of go from 90 to 53, and then you go up to, what is it? 69? Is that right? Am I doing that right? 53, 63, no, 70. Wait. Yeah, 69. It's really kind of overall, it's a 90 to 69 cut. So you're cutting, 21 players. But it's going to probably rotate a little bit. And keep in mind that the real deadline is next Tuesday, when they will find out whether they're really on the week one roster and guaranteed their week one paycheck. And if you're a veteran, you're guaranteed your salary. So there could be a lot of churn at the back end of the roster between even today and next Tuesday. We'll see. Again, the way waivers works is that starting today, players that are waived, if they're under 4 years of service, so the young guys, they go on waivers. Then they can be claimed by another team, and it's done in the order of the draft order. So the Seahawks are 16th in the waiver claim order. And by 9 a.m. tomorrow, you find out if you got your waiver claim. And then at that point, people are free to sign. If someone makes it through waivers, then they're free to sign. If you are a vested veteran, which means more than 4 years of service, Of the guys we're talking about, I think only D. Eskridge, maybe John Radigan, I'm not sure, I'll have to look back, but Tyler Mayberry would probably fit into that. They are immediately available to sign with another team, and they could sign to the 53, but most likely they could sign to the practice squad. So we'll start hearing about that, and I think we'll have most of the practice squad figured out by tomorrow. We'll also be hearing from John Schneider tomorrow, and so the team will almost certainly have most of their decisions made by the time John Schneider is willing to sit down with all of us, and go from there. That he'll want to have that. There is a new interview that I think has just dropped from Yogi Roth. A little bit of an aside here, that he interviewed Pete Carroll. So Pete's the second time in as many weeks is showing up in public. So keep an eye out. Go check out. I think it's Y Option is the name of the podcast. Yogi's a friend of the show. I know Yogi and I know him through Pete, and so I'm sure they're good friends all the way back to SC, and I bet that conversation is good. So I will certainly take a look at that later. I'm going to quote tweet that, so I'll put it interview with Pete. Yeah, so that's another one to keep an eye on. Other things, I guess some things that are at least worth mentioning. It's looking more certain that the Denver Broncos are going to start Riley Moss at corner opposite of Patrick Surtain, and good luck with that. As a guy that played safety for them last year, and we will see how he holds up against the Seahawks receivers. I'll leave it at that. There is news from Diana Rossini, who reports that the NFL owners have voted to approve private equity ownership up to 10% for teams. I find this fascinating because I've got experience with private equity, and I am really curious. Private equity, one, does not invest in things that they don't think they can get significant return on. Two, they're not quiet about their, they don't invest in things that they have no say in. So I don't understand exactly how this dynamic's going to work, that private equity can get into NFL ownership, where it's generally like a lot of it's family, a lot of it's over decades. Private equity is generally looking to get their return out within 5 to 8 years. So I like the whole thing is fascinating to me. Very business oriented, like a little bit more of my past life, but I am curious about that. A bit of news. So the Washington Commanders have kept John Ridgeway on their roster. And the reason that that's news, you're like, who the heck is John Ridgeway? He is a nose tackle that the Commanders have been rumored to be looking to trade. And what was interesting to see is if they couldn't find a trade partner, which they couldn't so far, were they going to hold him on the roster, or were they going to have to waive him? Well, as of now, they have kept him on the 53-man roster. So this is going to force other teams that if they really want him, they are going to have to trade something to get him. And we'll see if the Seahawks feel like it's worth it to trade a draft pick for a player when there's a number of nose tackles. Siaki Ika is now available. Jacqueline Roy, I think, is a guy for the Vikings, nose tackle that could be available. What was his name? I put it out there. Quentin Boana, big nose tackle for the Titans, released, and he has former ties with the Cowboys. So Aden Dirty should know about Quentin Boana, and if they want him, he should be available. They also just saw him in joint practice. So move to the Seahawks, if they really are interested in John Ridgeway, as Brady Henderson has reported, We will find out. I'm looking through the other list of Commanders cuts here. Offensive lineman, center draft pick from last year, Ricky Stromberg, was waived as injured. Don't know if he'll be someone that the Seahawks are interested in. Caillou Blue Kelly, a guy that had been on the Seahawks roster at one time, was cut. Chris Rodriguez, the running back, is cut. He's an interesting player. And again, you just always have these running backs available. So I just am not worried that they're Frank Gore Jr., who had some huge games in the preseason. He was cut by the Bills. There's always running backs available. So interesting there with John Ridgeway. I am curious when we get news about the Bills cuts and the Vikings cuts. I might want to try to do a little search on the Vikings cuts to find out. There's a nose tackle there that I was curious about. It turns out, I guess oh no, never mind. Forget what I said. I saw something that was confusing. Ignore it. I hate how Twitter will have a tweet show up that was from yesterday at the top of your feed as if it's the most recent thing. That's not useful. While I was jabbering, we had an amazing gift. Isaac has gifted 5 Hawkblogger memberships. You guys know this is my favorite thing. I absolutely love this. And I was just looking at this literally, just recently. We're almost to like 700 members, which is amazing. At the beginning of August, we had like 100 members. We are just growing by leaps and bounds. We're going to be up 1,000 members soon enough. If you're someone who gets a membership gifted to you, really think about paying it forward. That's part of how we do things in this community. If you get something, try to give something. And that can be re-upping. It can be upgrading to a club level membership. It can be, a bunch of things that you can do to pay it forward. But really, really appreciate Isaac showing some leadership here and being somebody who's gifting memberships around. So appreciate you on that. All right. What was I saying? Oh, yes. I want to look to see if I can find the Vikings. Let's see if I can find the Viking roster. They have. Cool. That just got released 50 minutes ago. And let's see. So TJ Hawkinson got moved to the PUP list. Not a surprise. Gabriel Murphy, a guy that the Seahawks showed, I think, some interest in, they was on injured reserve, designated to return, as well as guard Dalton Risner. Okay, waived the following players. Andre Carter II. That's an interesting name. Why am I reacting like that to Andre Carter II? This was a guy I never was particularly interested in, but he had a pretty remarkable preseason this year. I thought he had made that team. Let me double check. Andre Carter II, make sure I've got the right guy. He was a undrafted free agent last year. In preseason this year, he had a couple of sacks. He had 5 pressures in the second preseason game, 4 pressures in the third. I think part of the reason I knew about him is when I was doing the amount of pressures per game in preseason, he was one of the tops in the NFL, just like Jamie Sheriff, who was the top in the NFL. So interesting that Andre Carter is out there as an outside linebacker. Jacqueline Roy was cut. So that is another nose tackle that is available. That does mean that one of the guys I was interested in, I think it's, Taki Taimani, he used to be an Oregon Duck, who had a great preseason as an undrafted free agent, made it for them. That was a guy I thought the Seahawks might be interested in, but now Jacqueline Roy could be a guy that the Seahawks look at. So that's why I'm checking out the Vikings moves. I do see we have a super chat, so let me get to that. Luis De Leon, thank you for the super chat. It says, is it just me or did the 49ers defense significantly decrease? Then the Ayuk and Williams thing, I don't know. I've been talking to y'all about this for months. I think the 49ers defense was degrading even last year. A lot of it was blamed on the defensive coordinator at Steve Wilks. It was like, oh, he's the problem. He got fired even though they made it to the Super Bowl. Then they get rid of Eric Armstead. Then they trade for Malik Collins and they bring in Leonard Floyd, both guys who are a liability against the run. They already have Javon Hargrave, who they're paying a ton of money to, who also is a liability against the run. I think it's a problem for them. I think the Ayuk thing, I still don't know how that's going to turn out. I honestly don't. And everybody thinks that they do. I don't think they do. And then the Trent Williams thing that came out today, that he's like, he's a guy that is willing to wade into the season. He's done it before. He will hold out until he gets the money he thinks he deserves. This is a guy that he is the best lineman in the NFL. He should be getting paid $30 million plus a year potentially. 49ers can't do all these things. So yeah, I think that it's a tough one for them. I think it is a tough one for them. Look at this. We've got a anniversary. This says that Smokehawk's been a member for a month. It feels like it's been for many, many more months, but absolutely a huge fan of Smokehawk, who's also one of our moderators. Appreciate you, Smoke. Says, any other nose tackle you think are targets for Schneider? So I did write an article on this and over at hawkblogger.com, and I will drop the link to that in chat. Excuse me. Let me do that now. Nose tackle target article. And if you're listening on replay, you could just go over to hawkblogger.com. It's one of the first articles there. And I'll share this tab here so you can kind of see what I'm looking at. Al Woods is a guy that I just don't think makes sense. He's 37 years old. I don't think he makes sense right now. Brian Monet, I don't know if he's ever going to play again. Isaiah Buggs was a guy that has had serious off-field issues. Eli Andrew is an older player for the Bills. Could be an option. He's not all that great. Siaki Ika is a guy that was cut. He was a third-round pick last year. He is someone that the team just got a first person look at against the Browns. They could have him for nothing. Taki Taimani seems like no longer an option, most likely, although he could be in the same category as John Ridgeway, and that maybe the team kept him because they want to trade him, but I don't think he is. This is Quentin Bohanna, who I just mentioned. He is available and was cut by the Titans, so he's a possibility. Keandre Coburn also with the Titans. I assume he's with the team, so I wouldn't assume he's available, but he was a guy I think would be really interesting. So that's a couple of names that I would mention. Let me get back to sharing the cuts. So thank you for your question, and thank you, Smoke, for all you do as a member and as a mod of the channel. We are now over an hour since cuts have been filed, and still no information that I know of from the Seahawks. Typical. All right, I think, oh no, this is, nope. That's just somebody posting what we already know. Some news here relative to the 49ers. Matt Mayako says, I wasn't expecting the 53-man roster to open with John Feliciano and Ambry Thomas on it. Feliciano looks as though he'll be back sooner than Kyle Shanahan's thought. Thomas is expected to miss a lot of time with a fractured forearm. So interesting that those guys both are on the 49ers roster. They only kept two tight ends, George Kittle and Jake Tonges. Or Tongus, I don't know. George Kittle had a pretty serious injury this offseason. He's been a pretty durable player, but he has gotten injured. So they are thin, very thin at tight end. You'd have to expect they're going to make some sort of move there. Looking through here, in case you were curious, Patrick Mahomes seems like he's safe. I think he's going to make the Chiefs. I can't confirm that, but that's just a strong initial belief I've got. Looking around other places. I'm going to start looking at some other rosters that have some interesting players. Let's take a look at the Bills. Who the Bills cut. There's names on that roster I was kind of curious about. I don't know. It doesn't look like the Bills have announced their cuts yet either. I really wonder what the benefit is of being tight-lipped about your cuts the longest. But it is what it is. All right. So I am still not seeing anything there. Let's take a look and see if the Ravens have announced any cuts. That's a team that could be a team that the Seahawks are interested in. People are saying the Ravens last year released it around 8 o'clock that night. So that might be what we see from the Seahawks too. And so if that's the case, I will not be on live when that happens. I will have to wait until later because I'm going to head to the VMAC here in roughly like 45 minutes or so, and covering some stuff going on at practice. So we will see if the Seahawks, hopefully, it'd be nice if they told us a little earlier, but if the Ravens do it at 8 o'clock at night, don't be surprised if the Seahawks are also very late at night. The thing is that they already had to turn in their names. Like that's not changed. So I that's the part that I'm not sure what the benefit is of not announcing. You can't change it right now. It is what it is, but that's just the way of the world. So you got to deal with what you deal with. Looking around, seeing if there's any other new news right now. As of now, I'm not seeing anything. Yeah. Yeah, looks I guess we could look at, here's the Texans. Anything interesting with the Texans? Noah Brown's a decent receiver. Desmond King's an interesting nickel corner. What did Desmond King do last year? Desmond King. Desmond King is almost 30 years old. He was a decent nickel corner last year. So that's a guy to keep an eye on. If Artie Burns is an IR candidate, Desmond King has played slot cornerback last year. He had a 76.3 coverage grade. He had a 78.7 run defense grade. So Desmond King is an interesting name from the Titans, and I'm just making sure. And he is not, because he's been in the league as long as he has. He's a vested vet. He can be signed right away. He doesn't have to go through waivers. If Artie Burns is hurt, he's an interesting name for sure. Who else? Nothing else particularly interesting from the Titans moves, but the Desmond King one's one to keep an eye on. Let's keep going. What else can we find? Yeah, we've already seen the Texans moves. Here are the Bears moves. Jake Curhan was cut by the Bears. What a shock. That's good news for the Bears fans. Quarterback Austin Reed was cut. I thought Austin Reed looked decent. Defensive back, cornerback Ro Torrance, who had some time with the Seahawks and then played pretty well for the Bears in preseason. Cornerback. He's a longer, lankier guy. He was cut. No one else that really jumps out from the Bears. Jacob Martin, who we all like, the edge player, was placed on IR, designated to return. So that's him. If you watch Hard Knocks at all, the Canadian Eagle, the guy that stripped down to his skivvies while singing, he got cut. Scrolling through to see if there's anyone else of interest. Looking through the Rams roster. Yeah, no one particularly of interest from the Rams. So not going to cover stuff there. The Tim Patrick cut from the Broncos is interesting. You know, he's a slot receiver, and I mean, he's not interested for the Seahawks, but I think he's interesting for somebody. Not a lot there. Drew Sanders, their draft pick, we already know has been put on injured reserve. Not much there. Let's see. Oh, the Bills. I think we just got the Bills moves. Let's take a look. Oh, they did release Eli Anku, so that nose tackle that I mentioned, he was released. Lyle Collins, the guard, cut. So that's an interesting name. Frank Gore Jr. we talked about. That's probably it as far as guys that are interesting. But those are the names that we know about from the Bills so far. Center Will Clapp was released by the Bills. I don't know Will Clapp, but people seem to think that he's worth making mention of. So let's take a look. Will Clapp. Okay. I'm not seeing anything from Will Clapp, so I don't know why they're making that a big deal. I might just be missing something. Let's see. Anything else? Looking around here. I don't know if I see much else, guys. I think that's where we are so far. I was kind of hoping that I'd come on and the Seahawks would drop some news for us to react to, but it's looking like they're gonna hold on for a while. What I might do, I think I'm gonna pause the show for a second. I'm gonna keep the chat going, but I'm gonna go get a refill of water, check on my kid, make sure everything's good there, and be back in a little bit. So feel free to hang out. I will come back and keep an eye on news. And as news breaks, I will be here. So feel free to chat amongst yourselves. And I will be right back. All right, folks. Thank you for your patience as I do my fatherly duties and refill my water so you can actually hear my voice. Nothing particularly jarring has happened since I left. A couple little bits of news. Worth calling out that the Browns have kept 4 quarterbacks on their initial roster. That feels odd, and certainly is not something that is sustainable. So that's something that probably will change. There was one other thing that I thought I saw. I'm trying to find it now. You'd think I'd have that figured out before I came back on, but no. Where was it? Let me see if I can find it here. Or not. There's a couple things that were of note. So the Cardinals placed Darius Robinson on IR, destined to return, which designated to return, which we I think expected. The Commanders draft that I talked about, they not only they cut Chris Rodriguez and Ricky Stromberg, but 5 of their 7 draft picks from 2023 are no longer with the team. So that is rough, but that's what happens when you get a new GM, a new coach, and they don't feel obligation to prove anything. It's usually for the best of the team if that's the case. Interesting piece here. So Adam Schefter reports, I've already talked about Odell Beckham and Bradley Chubb being on the reserve PUP. Another name is Isaiah Wynn. Isaiah Wynn, their offensive lineman, is expected to be a starter for them, as well as River Craycraft, the wide receiver, and cornerback Cam Smith. So Craycraft and Smith are designated to return, but they will not be back in time for the Seahawks game in week 3. So let me do a quick tweet about that while I'm on with you guys. Lots of Dolphins missing the week 3 game in Seattle. Let's take a quick look at some of those players. Since we've got nothing else going on, the Seahawks are making us wait around. Depth chart wise, I think that Isaiah Wynn was expected to be a starter. They've got him like not really listed right now because he's injured, but I've been monitoring this for the Dolphins, and they've been kind of playing this waiting game to see when he was going to come back. I'm taking a look to see, like last year, yeah, he played 392 snaps for them last year. And if I go to the depth chart from, let's see, like last year, well, I don't know. Let me get a little bit earlier. Yeah, he was a starting guard for the Dolphins last year. So that's meaningful. And the Dolphins offensive line is a challenge. So we already know Odell Beckham Jr. won't be there. Bradley Chubb won't be there. And then Cam Smith is another player for them who, let me just take a look-ski. I thought he as a cornerback was one of, it looks like they've got him as a backup. But let me take a look here. I thought Cam Smith got a number of snaps for them, so I'm going to check that last year. Not on offense. He would be on defense. Well, he didn't get many snaps last year. He only got 22 snaps last year. So maybe he's not as big of a plan, but he was a 2nd-round pick last year for the Dolphins. I thought they might be looking at him getting more snaps. So, we'll see. I'm getting some news that I can't share, but some of the players that the Seahawks have let go already getting some calls from other teams. So that's one to pay attention to. Wow. Wow, we've got a big one here, folks. Jalen Sundell, the center for this undrafted free agent center, is making the initial 53-man roster. This, according to Justin M., who is a reliable source. What does this mean for Oluwatimi? I'm to click on this link and read it live with you all. So Jalen Sundell played pretty well during the preseason. I just didn't think there was a chance that they would bring him on the initial 53. He felt like a safe player to stash on the practice squad. I'm going to double check sources on this one, but that would be the first real surprise. Jalen Sundell, if he were to make it, that could mean that Oluwatimi is not going to make it. But we are in the process of trying to verify that in real time. He's definitely, he's played well. I'm not going to mince words. I have definitely watched him more and more as the preseason has gone on, but I just kind of felt like, well, there's no way they're going to feel the need to keep a center that they could get through waivers, the sneak through waivers. But if you're curious, his overall grade in the preseason was a 72.4. He had a 73.7 run block grade overall. If we look at that by position, I think he ranked relatively well among all. Let's just look at all offensive linemen in preseason. I think he did reasonably well there. Of the guys that were, let's get guys that played a decent amount of snaps. And let's get this year. Yeah, Jalen Sundell, of the players that were of this year's draft class, he was the third ranked center in terms of run blocking, behind only Bo Limmer and Graham Barton. I don't think Olu had a great preseason in general. I think the question is, was it bad enough that he worked himself off the roster? I'm looking down to see where Olu had a 52.4 run block grade, where Jalen Sundell had a 72, a 73.7 run block grade. He did especially well in zone. He had a 74.6 run block grade in zone schemes. Pass blocking wise, not as strong. He struggled especially against Cleveland, but not as strong there. So that would be a surprise. I'm going to see if this person can confirm for me what it means for Olu. We will find out. So that is from, do not have confirmation on what it means for Oluwatimi, but they could keep an extra center. This could also mean that Raekwon O'Neal will get cut, that they'll keep an extra center in case Connor Williams is not ready for week 1, or in case there's any kind of setback or anything like that, and they just want to make sure that they've got some coverage. Even there, though, it's just odd because you can always do a week one. You can call somebody up. You have 3 call-ups on players in the practice squad. It's a surprise. It's a surprise if that has actually occurred. It seems likely. We just got confirmation that D. Williams has made the initial 53. So D. Williams will be the Seahawks returner. I think he's going to be the most dynamic Seahawks punt returner in many years, maybe since Tyler Lockett. Sorry, tweeting and talking at the same time. And we'll see what happens with what that means. He also had some moments as corner. He looked great. At times, he looked lost at times. He played receiver in college, but he also played some corner. So, I see Jen Maz saying Chenault is going to be the man. Chenault's not going to return punts. It'll be D. Williams for sure. And D. Williams and Chenault will be there for kickoffs. And I think both of them have great kickoff return capabilities. So, but as far as punt returner goes, I think it's very likely that that is going to be D. Williams. I think that's the only reason you keep him on this roster is to have that responsibility. And he has been number 1 on that position for a couple of weeks. So unless the team is doing something unlikely, they've been kind of showing their hand in terms of where D. Williams is on the punt return depth chart for a while. It was part of why I had him on the 53-man roster. It really would make 0 sense to keep him on the roster if they weren't going to have him return punts. He's not a good enough cornerback, and the kick return is not critical enough. They could have a number of guys do that. So, interesting to see with D. Williams making it, not a surprise, but the Jalen Sundell is interesting. I got to read this tweet from special teams coordinator Mike Eckler, who is from University of Texas, who's the one that shared the D. Williams news. He says, so fired up for D. Williams making the 53-man roster. They got a true, quote, this is his quote, they got a true fart in a skillet. What is a fart in a skillet? And why is that a good thing? Sorry, maybe I said Texas. I meant Tennessee. Yes, Tennessee. So I don't know why it's a good thing that the Seahawks got a fart in a skillet, but according to Mike Eckler from, special teams coach of Tennessee, that's what the Seahawks got in D. Williams. So that's a new one for me. So we got some speculation, people freaking out about the Jalen Sundell news. So that's new and interesting. I have got to start wrapping up, folks. I got to head over to the VMAX. So I am going to ask you, if you haven't already, to give the show a like and click subscribe, to click the bell to be notified when I go live, because it's very likely I will also go live from the VMAC at some point to cover what's going on. But the best way to stay in touch is to click the bell to get notified. And as soon as I go, as soon as there's something to go live, you will get notified and we'll do it. So keep an eye out. I don't know when that will be or how that will be, but when it happens, we will come on. So we get from a member, Ryan Tatum, saying, fart in a skillet, word origin, Butte, Montana. A very hyper person bouncing off the walls, stinking up the joint with their annoying behavior. Typically children, not always. Grandma says, you kids get, I don't know what, I don't know. It's an odd saying. I don't know that I want to normalize fart in a skillet. I think we'll stick with a dynamic punt returner. I think that's what I'm going to stick with when I describe D. Williams. All right, folks. Appreciate you all. Thanks for jumping on with me. I will be back with you later be sure to make sure you got the bell clicked to get notified when I go live. We will get more reactions to you soon. Until then, I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been a quick emergency podcast edition of Hawkblogger Mornings covering Seahawks cutdowns. Appreciate you all, and see you soon.